Hey everybody, it's Aldo Gandhi, and I just want to let you know really quickly that our swag shop is reopened. DeepDishTees.com is where you go, and that's tees with T-E-E-S. Clever name, guys. They're the new home of our merchandise. You can get t-shirts, you can get caps, you can get coffee mugs, you can get hoodies, you can get all sorts of good stuff, and you'll help out the borrower with the purchase. So head over to DeepDishTees.com.
Going to Wrigley Field was a huge, unforgettable deal that impacted my life.
Well, I think the Cubs winning based upon the gap was one of the biggest championships that have happened in any American sport in a really long time.
The first day that they introduced me, I said, baseball matters on the north side of Chicago. It's one of the, I love baseball and I love fan bases where it's important.
Well, I always hated the idea of the Cubs as lovable losers because I don't think there's anything lovable about putting an inferior product in front of baseball fans.
It would be the highlight of my career to see that happen and to get a chance to call it. And it didn't disappoint.
I auditioned for the new kid. His name was Billy Crystal. I don't know whatever happened. But I'm on the Chad and Ryan show.
Welcome to Friendly Confines, Extra Innings with Chad Gordon and Ryan Lieber.
Hey everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Friendly Confines Extra Innings edition. I'm Ryan Lieber. Chad is on vacation this week, so I will be riding with you solo. Producer Aldo Gandia will pop in later in the program. But man, I think Chad left at the perfect time because if you're a Cub fan, just like me, and you've been watching this team over the past week and change, I don't even know what to say at this point. This has been absolutely rough to watch at this point. It has been demoralizing, to say the least. And I said on the podcast this week on our newest episode that you can find where podcasts are available, whether that's on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever else you get your podcasts, that I really believe that the season's over at this point. I really think that, unfortunately, the Cubs are at a point where they're not going to be able to come back from this. And this is what management wants. And this is what we're going to start to see and talk about. And we're going to get into all that today here on the show. The Cubs are playing tonight. They have a 7:10 first pitch against the Philadelphia Phillies. The good news is they're back at Wrigley, where they've been playing absolutely magnificent baseball. So hopefully, maybe they can kind of turn the corner and maybe start things off on this home trip a little better than it has been, because as you've witnessed, it has just been absolutely awful to see this team play over the past week and a half. Of course, you can find me on social media. It is at Ryan D. Lieber, so be sure to check me out there. Plus, I'm happy to answer all of your questions throughout the evening's broadcast before the game is on. So hopefully you have us on, and then you have the game on in the background as the game is about to, start their first pitch in a little under about 5 minutes or so. But let's start here in the 10th inning. And as we mentioned at the top, the Cubs have lost 9 straight games. It is rough. It is brutal. And ever since that no-hitter against the Los Angeles Dodgers, the Cubs have just been lifeless. They lost 3 in a row against the Dodgers, then another 3 against the NL Central's leading Milwaukee Brewers. And then they finished it up with just a lifeless series against the Cincinnati Reds, where this team scored 1, 2, and 2 runs in the 3 games against Cincinnati. The bats are just dead right now. And this team is not looking good. This team is absolutely dead on arrival. Chris Bryant played well in the last game. He's hit a home run. He, maybe is starting to get back to where he was in May. But I don't see a way out for this team at this point. 9-game losing streak. They're 42-42 entering tonight. Now they're in third place behind Cincinnati. And luckily the Cardinals are streaking as well in the wrong direction. So that's been the one, just kind of life support that the Cubs have had to hang on to at this point. Otherwise, this team would be just, who knows where they'd be right now. But look, this is what management in the beginning of the year wanted. They were looking to trade players like Yu Darvish to get this team to a point where they were going to start over, so they had a reason to sell on these players. And now that's what we might be seeing as the trade deadline approaches. We are going to have to see a complete 180 from this team if they are going to have any shot of trying to, get back to the division lead. It is absolutely amazing, though, to see where this team was just over a week and a half ago, where they were basically tied for first place or a game out of first place. They threw that no-hitter against the Dodgers. You had some, at least positive vibes going into the rest of that series, and it has just been an absolute just abomination to see this franchise play at the way that they have been over the past, 9 games, because we are now seeing what this team is capable of doing, and that is ultimately what I think management was hoping for, so they had a reason to potentially sell the players. So let us move on to the 11th inning, and that is where we go. Time to potentially sell this team. I know Chad, if he were here right now, he would absolutely disagree with what I'm saying. He would think that, no, we need to stay the course. We need to, try to see if this team can hang on. The core is there. The players are there. Listen, guys, I want this team to win as badly as anyone does. I'm a diehard Cubs fan, just like Chad is, but I'm also a realist. And I recognize that this team, as presently constructed, is not going anywhere. They're not a good baseball team. You got to go with the players you have and say, who now can we get the most value for if we trade them? Who are those guys? Is the core even remotely going to look even like we have seen it over the past 5 seasons? Are we talking about a team that's going to no longer have Chris Bryant, that's no longer going to have Javi Baez or Anthony Rizzo, or for that matter, Wilson Contreras? I think every player on this roster, including Anthony Rizzo, including Kyle Hendricks for that matter, is somebody that you have to look at and say, if we're going to be able to get something for these players, we have to seriously look at the potential of trying to get something in return. Major League Baseball, as you see below, the trade deadline is coming up in just under 26 days at this point. So we are going to know without a doubt if this team is going to be selling. And I can tell you right now, they're going to be selling. So with that, let's move on to the 12th inning, because I think the question is, who's going to go first? All right, and we do have a question here. Jed needs to be fired and David Ross. Listen, I don't know if David Ross is the problem or the answer at this point. I can tell you that he doesn't have much to work with. So given what David Ross had in the beginning of the season, listen, I agree that there have been mistakes that have been made by David Ross. I don't know if he necessarily handled this pitching staff the way that I ultimately would have. I don't think he gives the starting pitchers enough slack. I think he's always quick to pull the trigger on these guys and go straight to the bullpen. And, at the end of the day, if you can't get more than, 4.9 innings out of your starters, you're not going to get very far. And the Cubs are not getting, quality starts out of these guys. And I understand that they're not always throwing great games, but they didn't lose these last 3 games against the Reds because of their pitching. I can tell you that. Alec Mills had a very strong start in his last outing. He struck out 9 batters. He's a guy who should be back in the rotation. Kyle Hendricks has been pitching much better. Albert Alzolay has been pitching really, really well. I understand Jake Arrieta is not, doing what he needs to be doing, and that's a completely different conversation. You're going to get Trevor Williams back soon. He's pitching well in AAA. And then we got to see what ultimately are they going to be able to do But the pitching is not the issue as far as I'm concerned. It really is, in my opinion, the bats. And that was supposed to be their strong suit. Santiago, who I know is a watcher of our show, thanks for joining again once, as you always do. So he says, what is bothersome is that management doesn't seem to care about the fans. Look, I can't sit here and say that the Ricketts are handling this situation well. We're the third largest market in the country. There is no reason why this team should not be able to go out and put a competitive team on the field each and every year. We see the Dodgers being able to do this every single year with a team that is competing for titles, and that is what we ultimately thought the Cubs were going to do. We're not seeing that right now. And then you got a team 8 miles down the road on the south side. They're competing for a World Series this year. They're putting out players that they have multiple injuries, as we all know, to, what's going on with the White Sox. And yet they have guys coming out of their farm system that are just next man up mentality, stepping up and just killing it right now. They're doing a great job. The Cubs just don't have that. And they need to replenish the farm system, but there is no reason why this team shouldn't be able to go out and get big time free agents as well. So for me, I just feel like that, yes, I think that ownership has done a very poor job right now of kind of showing that we are committed to building a winner each and every year. I'm going to be curious to see how the Ricketts handle it from here. I understand that they had their issues during the pandemic, just like everybody else, but you can't sit here and tell me that because, everyone else had, issues during the pandemic, the San Diego Padres went out and they added payroll. The Dodgers went out and they added payroll. The Houston Astros are continuing to compete at a high level. So just all of that, rolls into this situation with the Cubs. And it's just sorry right now. It's just a really sorry situation. So, okay, let's go to the 12th inning. Who goes first? Who are the players that you sit there and you say, well, obviously these are the guys that I think we're going to get the most for? Well, it starts with the two All-Stars. I think that's easy to say. It's Craig Kimbrell and it's Chris Bryant. Both of those guys, I think, are going to get you the most in return. I think you can make the argument that Craig Kimbrell right now might be the guy that's going to net you the most coming back. He's arguably the top 3 closer in baseball this year. He's on a friendly contract, and he's a guy who I think the Cubs are going to look at and say, I think Kimbrell's going to, give us something in return. There's lots of teams that are in contention right now that are going to be in the market for a closer. So, certainly Craig Kimbrell can, put himself out there. And I think the Cubs are in a nice situation, at least with him, where they can get something in return. The other player, of course, is Chris Bryant. Bryant had some phenomenal numbers that he was putting up, early on in the season. He's starting to kind of get his groove back a little bit, with the numbers that he put up over this past weekend with the Reds. So I certainly think Chris Bryant obviously is a free agent, so you're not going to get exactly what you want, but listen, he's hitting 272, 16 home runs, 42 RBIs. He's obviously the guy who I think at the end of the day is no longer going to be a member of this team. Where does Chris Bryant go? I am as curious as everybody else where the Cubs would deal him. I know the Mets are probably a team a lot of people are looking at right now. They could use Chris Bryant. They have the money. They have the space. So I certainly believe that he's somebody that I think the Cubs can net. And then after that is Wilson Contreras, a guy that you look at and say, okay, maybe he's somebody we look at and say, okay, he's great defensively. He puts up a lot of power numbers. Catchers are a hot commodity, especially when you're handling a pitching staff. He's still under a team-friendly deal. And the Cubs have Miguel Amaya in the minors, somebody who could easily come up next year and start for this baseball team, given another, a few seasons or rather this full season in the minor leagues. So he could be a guy too. I don't know if Javi Baez is going to be shopped around. He might be, but I don't know if he will be. I think the Cubs are going to try to hang on to Javi, and I certainly don't think Anthony Rizzo is going to get shopped around as well. He's obviously the leader. He's the core. He's somebody that I think still is going to be able to bring people into the ballpark. Because if you sell everybody, listen, I wouldn't pay the exorbitant prices that Wrigley is charging right now in June to watch this baseball team play. So for me, I think it's safe to say Rizzo will definitely still be with this baseball team when the trading deadline comes, as well as Javi Baez, as well as Kyle Hendricks. And then you got a big decision to make with Jake. You're not going to be able to trade him, obviously. You just got to make the decision. Do we drop him? Do we DFA him? Do we just do a throw-in with him and a team releases him? I don't know. I know everybody wants to talk about Jason Hayward as well. He's got that huge contract. Who's going to take on a guy who's hitting under 200 this year with $40 million that are owed to him over the next 2 seasons? Unfortunately, I just think the Cubs have to eat that contract. I think they're just going to have to continue to play Jason Hayward. It's the worst signing this franchise has ever had. It is without a doubt the worst signing. He has been nothing short of just awful at the plate. Yeah, he made the speech in Game 7. Great. If that was worth $184 million, maybe it was because they got the title, then that's fantastic. But if the Cubs had money freed up because of Hayward's contract, I think they'd have a lot more flexibility. So for me, Kimbrel, Bryant, 1 and 2, those are the guys that I think are ultimately going to get the first 2 looks of what they can get in return for any big-time trades. And then we'll have to wait and see. Wilson Contreras, I think, would be the next guy. I know everybody wants, like I said, Hayward, Ian Happ. I just don't think anybody's interested in taking either one of those guys or anybody else for that matter that this team has. All right. We are going to take a break, but when we come back, Aldo Gandia is going to join us for the second half of the show. We're going to talk about the Cubs All-Stars, who we just briefly mentioned, and then we're also going to talk about how are Cub fans going to react if this team goes into sell mode. I'd love to hear from you. We also have that great interview that we did earlier this week that you can hear on our podcast with Dion Miller. So we're going to play part of that and get her insight on what she thinks the fans are going to feel like if this team goes all in on a for sale show. So stick around. We'll be right back. Pay some bills. You're watching the Friendly Confines Extra Innings Show on the Barroom Network.
Baseball at the Barroom. On Monday nights, get ready for the Friendly Confines Extra Innings. It's 30 minutes, it's clever, it's concise, and it's all Cubs coverage. That's followed by a killer White Sox show, South Burbs Hitmen. Then on Thursday afternoon, it's Cubs and Sox opinions and analysis with Crosstown Crosstalk. Baseball at the Barroom. Join us live and or on demand.
White Sox fans to this day wanted A.J. Hinch. Tony La Russa haters that would rather have a guy that fixed the playoffs and World Series in season than Tony La Russa. And I have a huge problem with that. I do. Don't go preaching about, okay, he drank and this and that, and he shouldn't have done this, he shouldn't have done that. You guys wanted A.J. Hinch, and you're going to talk to me about Tony La Russa.
All right, welcome back, everybody, to the Friendly Confines Extra Innings Show. I'm Ryan Lieber. Chad Gordon is off this week, so I'm flying solo. But I do have a little bit of an assist. Aldo Gandia, our producer, he's here, enjoying the beautiful weather from his backyard. Aldo, what's going on, man? How you doing? Oh, wait, Aldo, you're muted. Turn that mic on, buddy.
I'm sorry. I was just wanted to say it's been a great holiday weekend. I hope you and your loved ones had one too. And for that matter, everyone who watches the Barroom Network and has helped us grow to where we are at now. Hope you had a great holiday.
Thank you, Aldo. Yeah, same to you. It's great. Of course, it's always important to remember how we got here and to celebrate our freedom and to celebrate this and take nothing for granted. Obviously, this July 4th holiday, it certainly means the world to me, knowing that we live the way that we do and we're able to talk baseball like we can here at the Barroom Network. And I did want to mention, you saw the commercial. You can go to deepdishtees.com/barroom. You can get all your swag, T-shirts, hats of the Friendly Confines, plus other Barroom Network podcasts. So be sure to check it out. You don't want to skip out on some of this great merchandise that we have from deepdishtees.com. All right. So although
Ryan, can I interrupt? And I just want everyone to fully understand that this podcast, this video podcast, the Friendly Confines Extra Innings, is an offshoot of the outstanding podcast that you and Chad do that is audio only. And you guys, like the open shows, you guys have landed some of the premier guests imaginable for your show. And Cubs fans like George Will, the great political pundit, Bob Costas, the Hall of Fame baseball announcer, and on and on. You guys have just done such a sensational job of providing great guests and also top flight analysis. Both of you guys love the Cubs so much. It is so obvious. And so that audio podcast, which people can find at theconfines.com, you can get it for easy access there. You can find it there. So I highly encourage, if you're a Cubs fan, you should not be missing out on this podcast. It should be part of your regular delivery.
Thank you, Aldo. Yeah, absolutely. We certainly are so appreciative of the guests that we get. You mentioned some of them that we've gotten: George Will, Joe Buck, Carl Ravitch, Sarah Spain, David Kaplan, just to name a few, Boog Shambi, Pat Hughes. The list goes on and on and on. Len Casper. So we're so fortunate that we've been able to get some of these great, not only, like you said, Cub fans, but people that cover the Cubs and that have the best insight than anybody that know the ins and outs of this baseball team. Andre Dawson was kind enough to join us. So yes, make sure you go to theconfines.com. That's where you can sign up for the newsletter and you can get our new episode of our audio podcast delivered right to your inbox every time we have a new episode. And we have a new one coming out this week. We got Chris Emma from the Score 670. So be sure to check that out. He's a contributor on there. But I want to talk to you first as we move on to the 13th inning, Aldo. The Cubs got two All-Stars, Chris Bryant and Craig Kimbrell, the two obvious guys that I think deserve to be a part of this team. But I posted something on Twitter last night that I kind of thought was interesting. Now, the All-Star game is I believe, next week. It's July 11th. So I don't see it happening. But on the off chance it does, if the Cubs by chance deal both Chris Bryant and Craig Kimbrell before the All-Star game and they go to another team, I don't think the Cubs, I asked the question, would the Cubs get a replacement player? And the answer is no. I believe if the Cubs were to trade their All-Stars prior to the All-Star game, not only would they be playing on that particular team, I believe, for that because they are representing the All-Star team, but at the same time, the Cubs would then not have any All-Stars in the game. Now, I can't imagine the Cubs would be that diabolical and trade them for the game. However, I guess you never know, but that is something to consider because the two All-Stars are probably the two most likely to be dealt right after the game. Would you agree with that?
I totally agree. And I think, for many years, for decades, Major League Baseball had a rule where every team had to have a representative in the All-Star game. That rule no longer exists, I'm pretty sure. And so therefore, there would not have to be a replacement for those players. I imagine that if they were to be traded the day before the All-Star game, that they, if they're still in the National League, they would make their appearances as the National League team that they they would now represent, which would be really awkward. But in these awkward days of sports and baseball and you name it, I wouldn't at all be surprised. And boy, oh boy, a couple of the people in the chat room talked about how Cubs management just doesn't respect Chicago Cubs fans, and it's sometimes hard to argue with that. I know it's a business, but at the same time, boy, oh boy, should this team that played so brilliantly at the beginning of the decade after a years-long rebuild have to put their fans through such another exhaustive and long rebuild in basically the same decade, right? I mean, we're talking 10 years. This team has been at the very top and now scraping the bottom with their play. So it's really sad that Chicago Cubs fans may have to go through this again. And so I don't think we'll ever see a revolt because these are the lovable Cubs, but you might see some people try to get rid of their tickets and stay at home instead of going to the good old ballpark.
Well, and you make a good point. I mean, the prices are insane right now, especially for weekend games. I'm looking at tickets. It's for a game against the Diamondbacks, who are one of the worst teams in baseball. It's close to $300 a ticket for amazing seats. I wouldn't pay that. I would never pay that much money, A, just for a baseball game, and B, to watch this team play, let alone that. So, no, I wouldn't be in favor of that, and I hope that the fans do. If the Cubs go into full rebuild, I really do. I mean, listen, although you and I remember when each year the Cubs were dreadful, Wrigley would still sell out because it just was the thing to do. But I think fans have gotten more sophisticated, and they saw that the Cubs got really good. And then after a while, when they were in rebuilding between 2010 and 2014, that you didn't see fans necessarily going to the games as much as they were, and there were a lot of empty seats at Wrigley Field. It was kind of reminiscent of maybe you'd remember this better than me, but probably like the late 70s, early 80s days when the bleachers would be empty back in the day. You remember that when Lee Elia was the manager, things like that. So I can clearly see a situation like that if the Cubs, like I said, go into full fire sale mode.
Totally agree. There's so much competition for our bucks right now. You're talking about other sports. You're talking about other entertainment avenues and so forth. Major League Baseball teams, especially the Chicago Cubs, really need to work hard to make our fans happy. And I got a question for you. Look at these guys, Yu Darvish, Kyle Schwarber, and Nick Castellanos. They are all former Cubs who are now headed to the All-Star game. My question to you is, do you think the Cubs would still be in first place if those three guys were on the Cubs roster?
It's such a great question to pose. I mean, certainly I think they would at least be better, right? And I don't know about the Schwarber. I think Kyle Schwarber needed a change of scenery, my opinion. I don't necessarily know how successful he would have been if he had stayed with the Cubs. I think the Washington fit has been great for him. Now, with that being said, would Yu Darvish be a great piece right now in this rotation? Absolutely. And, again, this Cubs offense is pretty stagnant, so I don't know how much it would help or hurt him. I would have to think he would have thrown some games that the Cubs would have won for him. The one that hurts a lot is Nick Castellanos, for sure. I mean, this is a guy who we're now talking about, is potentially an MVP candidate. And he is hitting the cover off the ball. So he's a guy that for sure this team could have absolutely used. And they could have probably gotten him at a decent price, and they just refused to shell out the money for him. And it just, again, goes back to this ownership group and what I don't know what it is that they're looking at or what they're thinking right now. And it's devastating, especially for the fans. It really is devastating.
Really is.
Let's move on to the 14th inning. And speaking of the fans, as you mentioned, Aldo, Dion Miller, sports anchor at ABC 7 News here in Chicago, she was on our show, and her full interview, you can listen as we dropped it this coming week. But the portion of her interview was also in our podcast this week that you can hear the audio version. But here's part of our interview when I asked her specifically how she thinks Cub fans will be if the Cubs do decide to sell, and will this team or will these fans feel upset and continue to support this baseball team if these parts are traded. Here's what she had to say.
There will be some divisiveness there because the Ricketts do have the money. They could sign all three of those guys again, but at what cost, first of all, and second of all, what exactly are they getting for that money? I think that's in question now as these guys have gotten older, and especially Rizzo, and dealt with those chronic injuries that keep popping up for him that I think are always going to. Now, I would love for him to stay a Cub forever. But again, they have to weigh all of those costs as to, will it make us competitive? Because that's what the fans want too. They don't want these like trips to Milwaukee that are embarrassing. They don't want that. They don't want to go out to LA and get beat by the Dodgers again and again. That's not what they want. They don't want the Padres suddenly, beating them up too. Like they don't, this is not what the fan base wants. So I think there's some divisiveness, but for those who truly understand, I think they can get on board with moving forward and making the team better.
Yeah, she breaks a great point. I think my counter to that, Aldo, would be, why should we be in this position in the first place? There's no reason why the Cubs should be rebuilding or selling off. This team should have had that plan in place to continue to reload and not have to just rebuild. Again, I go back to the Dodgers, I go back to the Astros. Why are those teams able to contend each and every year with their core guys, and they've recently won World Series just like the Cubs did, and yet we're talking about a Chicago Cubs team that is, in just as big of a market, but yet now we're talking about them having to potentially start over again. To me, while I understand it, it just doesn't seem right.
I totally agree with you. It doesn't seem right. And I'll ask you this question. What happens if the Cubs, who play their next 7 games at home before this All-Star break, playing the Phillies now for a 4-game set, then the Cardinals, what happens if they win 6 out of 7? What if they go on a 6-game winning streak? It's not really hard to fathom when you look at their home record as being one of the best in the National League at 26-13. All of a sudden, the narrative shifts once again, and we would be talking about there's no way they can sell. They're still in this. So anything can happen. From week to week, I follow football like religiously, and from week to week, people just lose their minds over a loss, and then the football team wins a game or 2 in a row, and all of a sudden everyone's back in the bandwagon and stuff. Well, this stuff happens in baseball too, and it happens much more frequently during a 162-game season.
I tell Chad all the time, Aldo, I say, this is how I feel this week. I may completely flip my opinion, the next week, but for right now, I just don't see how this team can get out of it. But like you said, hey, if the Cubs go on a 6-7-game winning streak at home, and with the schedule that they have at Wrigley, it's conceivable that could happen. But yes, I don't know. I mean, at the end of the day, I still think that we're heading in the direction that this team is going to be peeling off the players. And quite frankly, Aldo, even let's say they do go on a 7-game winning streak, if they're still trailing the Brewers by 6 games, I think the only way they would be hanging on to any of these guys is if we're absolutely saying this team is in first place by the trading deadline. If they're not, and if they're 5 or 6 games out at that point, then I think the move is you got to trade Bryant. You got to, potentially trade Kimbrel, or you will trade Kimbrel, because otherwise you're just spinning your wheels. And if you're fighting for 2nd or 3rd place, Bryant's on his way out, and then you lose him for nothing. So I think we're going in that direction regardless. They're going to have to win without Bryant if they go on this, crazy win streak the rest of the way. All right, let's finish up here in the 15th inning now, and we are previewing the Confines this week. We mentioned that Chris Emma from the Score Sports Radio 670 is going to be our guest joining us. He covers the Cubs among other teams in the Chicagoland market. So I'm looking forward to checking in with him. Also, although I think the other thing that, we're going to dive in deep, because we're going to be recording in the middle of the week, is we're going to get a better idea of if this team can recover from this 9-game winning streak, because maybe by the time we record, maybe this team will have reeled off a few wins, or maybe they're continuing to lose. So for me, I think that's certainly going to continue to set the tone that the podcast is going to have this week. That's absolutely for certain.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to listening to that podcast. Chris Emma has been a great friend of the bar room over the years, and love it when he's talking Chicago Cubs baseball. I actually met him once at Wrigley Field, got to chat with him a little bit, and he's been a friend since then. So say hi to Chris and have a great show this week.
Thank you, Aldo. Yeah, I appreciate it. We also, I could be pulling the cart before the horse, but Ryan Baker is somebody that's going to be on with us in the near future. We've been chatting with him. So hopefully Ryan will be on the following week after that. And then we've also been chatting to Gary Sheffield Jr., who's a big presence on social media. He is the son of Gary Sheffield, and he is a contributor to Outkick and among other media outlets as well. So he's got some great opinions too. So be sure to check him out and be sure to watch to see who we have on the confines over the next several weeks. All right. So once again, I want to thank Dion Miller, who joined us last week, and you can hear her full interview on our episode that we have out currently. You can find that on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, where podcasts are available. Again, go to our website, theconfines.com. You can sign up and subscribe to the podcast. We certainly encourage you to do that. And of course, you can find me on social media. I am at Ryan D. Lieber. Chad is at the Chad Gordon. Aldo is at Barroom Network. And be sure to check out all the great podcasts that we have and offer at the Barroom. So be sure to check that out too. So that is going to wrap things up on this special extra innings edition of the Friendly Confines. Hopefully next week, Chad will find his way out of Mexico City and he'll be back with us. But Aldo, once again, you did a great job of pinch hitting for Chad. Was there any feedback you have? I know Chad likes to check in with you at the end of the show for any errors that we may have made. Anything that you have for us?
Hurry back, Chad.
That's right. That's right. So you can be on camera as little as possible. Well,
Exactly.
Although I always appreciate you stepping in when Chad's not here. Thank you for doing that. So for Aldo and for Dion, I'm Ryan Lieber. We appreciate you joining us. Join us next week here on another edition of the Friendly Confines Extra Innings, everybody. Go Cubs. Let's see if they can come back from this losing streak. Have a good night, everyone, and we'll talk to you next time.
Good night.